My name's Dan. I'm a pragmatist. I'm joined by
Mike Gilbert, local politician and local volunteer activist.
Welcome to 3 Fenmen in a boat, although it's 2 today because Alex, our left-of-centre lawyer, has decided to double book himself. So, new cabinet for a new Prime Minister. Chancellor Exchequer is John Healey. I initially thought that was a bit of a surprise. I read about his history because he served under Tony Blair, of course, and actually directly under Gordon Brown. So he's actually got some decent economic credentials, and hopefully this means that defence spending will increase because that's something that he was campaigning heavily for as Defence Sec. So now he's in charge of the purse strings. It would be incredibly funny if he didn't do that.
There's no escaping the sort of the fundamentals of the British economy, though, is there? At the end of the day, there is a massive funding gap. There's lots of spending departments demanding cash across the table to pay for their various projects and their various preoccupations, including the welfare budget, of course, which is like the one Labour Party shibboleth that can't really be challenged or gainsaid. He seems to be a safe pair of hands, but whether a safe pair of hands in an economy that's declined quite significantly since Blair and Brown were in power is going to enable him to have the leverage to spend more money, well, let's wait and see.
Andy Burnham's very active on TikTok, by the way. So if you haven't got TikTok,
I haven't got TikTok.
I
don't do social media, to be honest.
Have a download because he's posting on it almost every day, it seems. But anyway, one of the things he keeps talking about at the moment is government procurement needing to go to essentially British businesses and investing in the public sector, so the public sector can do more, rather than having to outsource everything all the time. If in terms of like increasing defence spending, well, actually, if that's just a case of allocating the budget so we can spend more on UK stuff, then obviously that just goes straight back into GDP anyway, because if you just spend money on like your own arms manufacturers, that just adds to GDP.
So these decisions are quite often quite perverse, aren't they? We're talking about investing in British companies, and yet very quickly after last week's meeting when we all met together, the government have announced they're going to buy Toyota Hilux as a military vehicle, which goes completely against the sort of thrust of this argument that we're trying to invest in British industry.
Well,
because of cost again, because we haven't got any money. I mean, essentially, this country.
Well, we've got loads of money. It's an allocate. We have got loads of money. The government spends an absolutely obscene amount of money every year on maintaining the state. It's an allocation problem.
It's borrowed money. I mean, the idea.
Well, they borrow some money.
The idea of an economy is that it generates significant amounts of social and economic value that enable it to pay people to pay taxes, businesses to pay taxes, and those taxes are then spent on servicing the needs of the economy and servicing the needs of society. At the moment, we don't actually generate anything like enough money to justify the amount of expenditure that we've got. We fill the gap with debt. And these people strike me, and one observation I will make is singularly incapable of grasping the fundamentals of any of that.
Because at the moment, our budget is minus 4.3%, which is minus 4.3% of GDP, and GDP is 4 trillion. We do spend an awful lot of money. The government has and raises a tremendous amount of money.
Yeah.
But, because I don't think anybody can say that £1 trillion is not a lot of money, right?
Of course, it's a vast amount of money.
So that's what the government has to spend. So it's not like they have no money. It's an allocation problem. They're just not spending it.
If you break that money down, though, Dan, into where it comes from, you find that some of it will be passported back from government through the economy, back in the form of taxation.
Yeah.
But the gap, if you like, is filled with huge amounts of borrowing, which then has to be serviced by taxation. So we're ending up in a kind of doom loop where, okay, things are being managed well at the moment, but the line on the graph is clearly, for this economy, heading gently south, and we have to do something about that. That means we have to actually grow the economy.
Yeah, I mean, like that deficit figure of minus 4.3%. Now, that it would be okay if GDP growth was 6%, for instance, because then that means that the amount of debt you've got relative to GDP stays level. It's not, it's 0.6%. So it's about 10% of where it needs to be. So if the economy was growing, decent amount, the borrowing wouldn't necessarily matter that much. I don't you read in the papers a lot about, people often use the metaphor of like the household budget
Yeah,
style
I know
thing
they don't really work.
you know, you've got to pay your mortgage off or whatever.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, governments don't have to pay off the mortgage because they don't die. Like, they don't, that, you know, there's no point at which any of this debt really has to be paid off by in its totality. So what matters is how much fiscal drag it causes. So how much is the interest dragging on essentially government spending?
Yeah.
You know, and that's the thing that the government really has to control. And that's going to be John's job over the next...
Well, he is, as I say, the safest pair of hands that we've had for a while in that role. So let's hope he makes a decent fist of it. But as I say, for me, the economic fundamentals are nowhere near as good as they need to be to enable his job to be done in a very straightforward way, given the competing demands of all the other spending departments he's got to somehow manage.
It's interesting, really, because, like, would you want Labour to just suddenly generate a load more money out of nowhere? Problem is, we had in the 80s and the 90s, we had a couple of good decades of just basically having too much money. Governments could basically spend that on whatever they wanted because there was just so much money floating around the system that they ended up creating a system that's very malfunctional.
Yeah.
Whereas now we have to have some kind of fiscal discipline because that seems to be what the bond market
I think what we did in the 80s and the 90s is we changed the nature of the British economy. We moved away from being an economy based on manufacturing, exports and things of that sort. And we moved very much into the realm of the economy being based on stock price values, house prices and things of that sort, with an underpinning of borrowing, not just government borrowing, but personal borrowing as well. Personal debt became a way of, if you like, growing the economy. And that worked for a very long time. But I think the problem we've got now
is... Did it though?
Well, you've just said we had a lot of money to fling around. We did have a lot of money to fling around back then because that economic model that came in around about the year 2000 actually did pay dividends for sort of at least a couple of decades. The problem is that model is now morphed into a very complicated financial ecosystem that is so obscure I don't think anyone really understands it. And that pays essentially for a very elaborate welfare program. And we need to look at those two things because both of those things are not, in a sense, ideal for our country or for our economy. And looking at the list of names on this piece of paper, I'm not completely convinced that any of these people absolutely grasp that.
Let's go to the next one. Foreign Secretary, Ed Miliband.
What do you say about Ed Miliband? I mean, Ed Miliband's father is
he's got an ideology.
Yeah, his father was a guy called Ralph Miliband, who was an intellectual Marxist. And I've read some of his books because I class myself as a right-wing Marxist. So I've sort of read a lot of Ralph Miliband's books. He's actually quite insightful about the way bourgeois, the middle-class economy of the 1940s, 50s and 60s worked. You know, he has quite a good understanding of the way an economy needs to work to ensure that there's the resources available to enable us to pay for the various departments that have to be financed. But he's also aware of where the contradictions are within that system and how those contradictions need to be properly resolved for the benefit of the working people. Ed Miliband's problem is his father was ideologically coherent. And
why is that Ed's problem?
Well, I think Ed struggles to offer the same level of coherence without really understanding the sort of the Marxianism, if you like, which underpinned his father's thinking. So whether you like Ralph Miliband's ideas or you don't, at least they were coherent ideas. I think the trouble with Ed Miliband is he doesn't really grasp economics. He doesn't really understand that you can actually bankrupt a country by going for a project like net zero, ratcheting up the price of energy and killing off your industries. What few industries you've still got.
Well, I mean, net zero didn't ratchet up the price, did it? I mean, we've talked about this before. I mean, that was the wholesale gas prices, wasn't it? That was
I mean, there are...
And the big problem with energy at the moment is that we link energy prices to gas prices,
yes, that
despite the fact that 60% of our energy comes from renewables and doesn't cost anywhere near that much. But
there are extra costs placed on consumers which finance
by the industry,
by various net zero projects, and I just think we need to get a sense of perspective on that. You know, Britain is a small country. You know, does Britain really have a moral obligation to destroy its own economy in an attempt to try and persuade China, India, and America that they need to do something about net zero? I'm not convinced that we really do.
We don't need to. I mean, because China are putting up acres and acres of solar and loads of wind turbines, and millions of the bloody things. That's not because they've had a particularly inspiring chat by Greta Thunberg.
No, exactly.
That's because, they've got financial reasons to do so. If we're going to talk net zero, my issue with the whole net zero thing is they seem to put an awful lot of emphasis on consumers, and really consumers aren't the problem. Like, what bag you put your yogurt pot in, as has very little to do with with the environment. What the fact that we've got a load of ships in dock along the Thames, belching out huge columns of terrible gases, that's a bit of a problem. Yeah. It's not the Thames; it's every single dock around the fact all of the planes that we keep sending up.
Of course.
The international shipping industry and air freight and flight and all the rest. That's the real big problem.
Yeah,
the massive industry. It's not really people deciding to have a 3-litre car instead of a 2-litre one.
You've touched on something quite interesting, and something that has always intrigued me, and that is how we've almost been, as a society in Britain in particular, but the West in general, had our existence repurposed, if you like, from being producers to being consumers. And of course, if you create a class of consumers, well, consumers want to consume more and more and more, and consumers' expectations go up and up and up. So, you make an interesting point. I mean, I've only ever flown on an aeroplane a couple of times. I'm not a great fan of flying anywhere. But on the other hand, I do know people who will holiday abroad twice a year, and I mean, and these are the sort of things, exactly as you say. These are the kind of consumer decisions that are being made on a mass scale, which are having a vastly detrimental effect on our planet. But we don't want to go and have a conversation about that. Somehow we want to put all the responsibility onto COP, the Conference of Interested Parties, to try and get them to do something about it. Well, of course, what they will come up with is something at a very high and strategic level, like we're going to stop working people eating beef because because we can do that. And the reason that happens is because we're not prepared to adapt our own behaviour to accommodate this need for far lower carbon emissions. And so for me, it's too much about the political system generally doing to us, because we're not actually in a position to, influence politics in the way that it feels like we're making the decisions, we're making the choices. I mean, that's the nature of our top-down, party-based.
Well, you don't get much of a say. I mean, it's worthwhile noting that Andy Burnham wasn't elected by the public as Prime Minister. He's come because Keir Starmer's resigned. So we haven't had a say in this, and we haven't had a say in his new agenda as a people. But like he says, Labour do have a manifesto, and everybody knows what Labour's really about. Fundamentally, everybody knows that they're left-wing and that they're a bit socialist, and so we shouldn't be surprised if they do socialist things.
I really don't like the party political system. I don't like top-down politics, and I certainly don't like the adversarial nature of politics, where you continually have people just arguing with each other and butting heads and trying to take chunks out of each other at the dispatch boxes because, they're a different colour of political, a different shade of politics to the people that they're confronting. That strikes me as being pretty childish politics in the 21st century.
It's not really governance.
No,
you govern all the people.
And I think one of the points that I would suspect, I can't remember the exact quote, but Ralph Miliband, Ed Miliband's father, would have said, is that this kind of politics is very much of a sort of a byproduct of the capitalist system, of a competitive system. And I think we have to look at whether or not competitive systems, be it in politics or in industry or in society, outside of sport, deliver anything good. Because frankly, I don't think they do. Collaboration is where we should be heading. And our political system should reflect that.
We're getting onto another bit of an aside here, but I mean, to me, that's an argument against more privatisation, though, isn't it? Because we've tried over the years to do public-private partnerships over and over and over again, and it just ends up in somebody basically profit-taking off the government. That's exactly what happens every single time. There are some niche cases where charities fulfil particular gap. For instance, Macmillan, as a charity, fulfills a particular gap for the NHS, and people are happy to pay extra out of their pocket to fund it. Notably, it is a charity, so therefore there is no profit. So, they're not profit-taking off essentially the public purse, but loads of people are. And then, when people say, well, where is all the money going? Because I often think, like I said, we have trillions of pounds to spend every year. Where the hell is it going? I'd love the government to actually add up how much of that is reflected in company profits at the end of the year from the projects they've outsourced.
Well,
how much profit have they given away as part of our bunny ears of outsourcing?
I think you've hit the nail on the head. I mean, as a sort of as a right-wing Marxist, I would argue that there is no real justification for privatisation. I mean, there's obviously the need for at a lower level of the economy, people to be able to be private, to be able to encourage private enterprise and to have small businesses. I don't see any problem with that. That really isn't what I'm talking about. But when it comes to things
like a parish council getting somebody to do like the verges or something. I mean, we're not talking about that.
No,
we're talking about national infrastructure.
Exactly.
Sort of stuff,
when it comes to national infrastructure, I think really that national infrastructure should be in the hands of the state. But the state itself should be in the hands of the people, if you like, and therefore exposed to the direct influence of people, so that things like efficiencies can be discussed. Water purity, water quality can be influenced by a public cry out for improvement, rather than
I still prefer bin faces policy of just make them swim in the rivers once a year. I quite like that.
But I think you're right about
they might clean it up then.
I think you're right about profitability, though. I think that when I remember when the PFI things came around and the privatisations, it struck me that what we were doing, we were claiming we were going to get greater efficiency, but the greater efficiencies we might have got were substituted by the need for profitability and to ensure stockholder value was being generated.
It's like, locally, Boston Borough Council took out a massive loan that's still a bit of a, I forget when it ends, but it's like 2032
I think we've settled
or something.
it now.
We settled it, have we? Yeah. But we had this huge loan where we're paying massive amounts of interest every year.
Yeah.
And it's just absolutely ridiculous. And I can't even remember what the money was borrowed.
Well,
it was for the gallery, wasn't it, I think?
No, it
wasn't it?
No,
I can't remember.
No, it predated that. We never really managed to establish what it was for. I think it was something to do with Boston Dock, but I don't honestly know. I can't remember.
But wasn't it Investec or Invesco or Chase? Anyway, one of these big,
it was a big bank.
International, banking organisation, investment banking organisations,
but the stewardship of public money is
it was
really
like
important.
8 or 9% interest, wasn't it? Something ridiculous like that,
But the stewardship of public money is really important, and I think if you can get things under the government's umbrella and a government properly responsive and responsible to the people, so a different kind of political model than the one we've got now, where essentially we've got this serial autocracy where these people get elected in and then they can do exactly as they like for 5 years. They can inflict all sorts of terrible things on us, hike our taxes, reduce.
Wow,
reduce
serial
the quality
autocracy. Other people call it democracy.
It is. Well, yeah, but again, is it really a democracy when you have so little power once the election is closed and you've got those people in power? I think there's lots of things that
it's not that you have so little power, is it? Because you can get rid of MPs once they're in. I mean, they've got to do something naughty in order to, enable you to be able to, trigger what's called a recall petition, which is how the people essentially get rid of MPs halfway through. But the reasons for a recall petition are quite, it's quite a high bar to be able to get rid of an MP after they've got in. And I guess I understand why, because you wouldn't want it to be too easy, or else the opposition would just be a nuisance all the time.
But I do think that the top down, the party based, and the adversarial nature of politics in the 21st century, when we've got the kind of competition that we're exposed to from around the world. I mean, bear in mind when this political system was established, it was to resolve the conflicts between landowners and creators of capital, who had diverse interests. Landlords wanted prices of land to go up to get higher rents, but of course the capitalist class wanted lower rental so they could employ people to manufacture products which would then be exported. So the settlement in the 18th century was to resolve these two competing interests. Exactly. Yeah. Now the problem is that we don't have that situation in this country now. We don't have those kind of competing interests to the same extent we would have had them back then, or indeed we might have had them just after the Second World War, when we had labour and capital largely competing with one another. And I suppose a binary party-based adversarial system might have worked for a few decades after the Second World War, but it sure ain't working now. You've only got to look at this list of names on this piece of paper to realise that half of these people not only don't understand the system and the economy that they're having to manage as a cabinet, but they have no solutions to the many problems this country faces either.
Let's just quickly go through them then. Home Secretary Shabana Mahmood is the first Muslim woman to hold one of the 4 great offices of state, and apparently she's more or less stopped the boats, which is a good thing, I think.
So it's alleged.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I've not seen the beaches, but I believe the stats. Louise Haigh has been appointed the Chancellor of the Duchy of Lancaster, which is essentially sort of a minister without portfolio, and she's said to be sort of Andy Burnham's ideas lady. She, of course, famously was convicted of fraud after she pled guilty in 2014 because, I mean, essentially what happened is she reported a phone missing and then it turned out later that it wasn't missing and she just basically nicked a phone off somebody.
Oh, I thought she claimed on the insurance. She claimed she'd
was
lost
it insurance?
she claimed the phone that she'd been mugged and the phone had been stolen.
So she essentially stole a mobile phone
and then Aviva
off her insurer.
Paid out £1,000 or something.
Yeah, and it was Aviva that she worked for at the time, which was, so it was all, whatever. I mean, it's a phone. It's not like having £5 million arrive in your account and not bothering to declare it, is it? We've got Yvette Cooper at Health, who was Foreign Secretary, and I think she wanted to keep the job, but she's moved over to Health. She seems like a pretty decent person, so I think she'll do fine wherever. Pat McFadden has got his job back at Work and Pensions. Angela Rayner's back. I mean, I really don't like her for a whole variety of reasons. Defence, Wes Streeting. I like Wes. I think he seems like a decent chap. I don't really know why he's been moved from Health, because I thought he was doing a good job there. And he used to work in Health, of course, so it just seems a bit weird that he won't let him keep doing that job. But I understand the logic. He's seen as a reformer, and so Defence needs reform, so he can go there and do that. Lucy Powell is Education Secretary. I did find it funny, one of her tweets the other day, the Conservatives were marking up with red pen and gave her a C, see me later, note at the bottom because she can't see English.
She's like me, she can't spell.
Yeah. Her England wasn't good. And Chief Whip, Annalise Midgley, don't really care about Chief Whip. And Jonathan Reynolds, who was Chief Whip, it's not the other, he's got his job back as Business Secretary, which I think is a decent move. Energy Secretary is Miata Farnbula, I think. Apologies if wrong. Is apparently a protege of Ed Miliband, and she's the recent intake. And then Transport Secretary Heidi Alexander, Culture Secretary Lisa Nandy, and Women and Equalities Minister is Bridget Phillipson. And they've separated out Women and Equalities from something, haven't they? It used to be Women and Equalities and Employment or something like that, but they've separated it out again.
It'd be interesting to know how she tackles things like the grooming gangs and stuff like that.
Indeed.
I think the last candidate in that role did a particularly spectacular job.
No. Louise Haig's the one that I think we've got to watch, because she's the one that's, supposed to be Burnham's brains, as it were, behind the scenes. So she's like the new Michael Gove. And Michael Gove, got involved with pretty much everything when he was in government. Some things for good and most for bad, to be fair. But I mean, he had some ideas that seemed to work, and most of them,
when we had David Cameron in power, there was the Private Eye used to do a cartoon called Chums. And,
I can't remember Chums.
Yeah, it was all about David Cameron, old Etonians and all his friends, and it's quite an amusing cartoon, And when I saw, when I sort of looked at this list of names and looked at a little bit into the background of some of them, they're not chums of Burnham, but they're like friends, aren't they? It's like a kind of it brings to my mind the sort of the soap opera of modern politics, It's like a kind of...
They kind of all feel like frenemies. Do you know what I mean?
Well,
not quite that maybe, but like... Because it's like, if you were being cynical, right, you'd look at Wes Streeting and say, well, look, Wes Streeting was a leadership challenge. You just couldn't quite get the number of votes. The main reason for that is because he was actually doing a decent job in Health. I mean, yeah, the stats have been massaged a little bit, but everybody does that when they get into Health. But in general, I think... most people would agree that the NHS is gradually getting better has done over the last 2 years. So, Wes is doing, and he got rid of NHS England, which I think most people would have... Was it NHS England? Yeah. Which I think most people would agree, is a good thing, because it just got rid of a whole C-suite tier of loads of people who weren't really doing anything. But then he's been moved to Defence, which isn't really his natural. I think his granddad was maybe in the army or army adjacent or something.
So was my granddad.
But like,
we've all got somebody.
Yeah, I know. It's like
at some point in time.
But like, he's got no real. Whereas I kind of get it a little bit because John Healey was defence and I think he was in the military, wasn't he? So he had a bit of relevant experience.
Well, maybe the problem is that if John Healey were there, John Healey would be able to sort of act as a bellwether around how much progress had actually been made since he left that ministry. Whereas Wes Streeting, coming as a clean skin, won't have that opportunity to measure the progress because he won't have any idea about what sort of progress he would expect. He's coming in new. Yeah, John Healey has the benefit of being able to say, well, actually, I wanted to go much further, much faster, and still things aren't happening.
Well, he could do, but the point is, it feels like it's a bit of a setup for Wes, because he was in a department that he was comfortable in, that he knew he was doing a good job at. It's halfway through the term, as it were. It's halfway through, and then he's been shunted across to defence. So that feels like they're just setting him up to, for a challenge at least.
Well, they're either setting him up or they're saving themselves. Or Burnham saving himself the embarrassment of having to climb down at some point in the next couple of years when he can't deliver the expectations of the Defence Review and all that sort of thing.
But the one thing that I think is really interesting is there was a lot of talk about Ed Miliband becoming Chancellor beforehand, and I think a lot of people were surprised when he wasn't made Chancellor. So why do you think that was?
Well, you'll remember the Liz Truss fiasco. There are certain.
No, what happened? I was asleep.
Well, certain individuals come along, and the phrase I think they use these days is "spook the market."
Yeah.
And I think that with Ed Miliband's somewhat muddled kind of ideological obsessions, I think he was seen by a lot of people, certainly the right-leaning press, I think felt he was somebody who could very quickly spook the markets and do all kinds of damage to this country's reputation with the markets, and therefore he was not a risk worth taking. But because he's one of Burnham's chums, he had to be found a place somewhere. So the safest place to stick him is in the role of Foreign Secretary.
Why not leave him where he was? Why banish him? Because Foreign Secretary spends a lot of time out of the country talking to other people.
Well, I think it's a promotion. I think it's a promotion. I think it's a... It's one of the 3 or 4 senior officers of state.
Yeah.
I think it's a promotion as far as
it's kind of like an office where people put people that need to be in an important role, but they don't want them around.
Well, maybe
famously, Boris Cameron put Boris in the Foreign Office so that Boris was never in the country. So he got him out of. So he wasn't bothered by him. He was sailing. He was sailing. He was flying around and talking to people.
There may be something in that. Who knows? I mean, certainly I wouldn't want to spend a great deal of time with Ed Miliband, if I'm honest.
So you're on Andy Burnham's side there. Yeah.
Well. Yeah, I just look at them and just think, oh, goodness me.
And then I think that the other story that we probably need to talk about is Angela Rayner is refusing to pay back her severance payment. So basically, when she resigned last year in disgrace, in disgrace, I think is the appropriate wording. She got paid a severance payment of around about £16,000, something like that. And the reason this is a bit of a story is because she was incredibly critical of a series of Conservatives who all did the same thing. Got a severance payment very quickly. When they got rehired, they refused to pay it back, despite the fact that they've basically got if that was a normal job and it just seems like if you've been in the job for a bit and you get paid because she'd only been doing it a year, so she got 16 grand for getting sacked after a year.
Yeah,
and then she's gone back doing the same job within months, and then she's not paying. Well, and she's the point is she's criticised other people for doing that.
Yeah.
Now she's not paying it back.
I think there's these severance payments in politics. I don't really accept that there's a need for them. To be honest with you, I don't know why they're paid. I mean, these people are elected. It seems absurd that you're getting a £16,000 payoff because your feelings might be hurt. But the problem is that contractually, once you've had that money paid to you, it is yours. It then becomes a moral question as to whether you pay it back. Not actually a legal one. Legally, the money is hers. She's entitled to hang on to it, and that's the same for all those other people that she was criticising. I mean, one point, and that is, I've studied ideology a lot over the years, and one thing that struck me quite recently was about the left and the right. The left absolutely hate the power that comes with money, but they love the money that comes with power. And that is something which I think is becoming much more widespread across all.
Hold on a minute, say that again. They hate the power that comes with money, but they love the money that comes with power.
Yeah, when you listen to the left wing generally talking about the right, the sort of I would never kiss a Tory type characters, What they seem to perceive is a sense that the Tories somehow have power based on their money. So money propels them into power. What the left, on the other hand, don't seem to recognise, their minds are closed to this reality, is that they love the money that comes with power. So they get into power, and of course, like Angela Rayner, they suddenly find themselves lining their own pockets. And there's something quite outrageous about that. And I think it extends it's not just a sort of a left and right thing these days, because I think, looking at the list of names here, you could put some of these characters into the Lib Dems or indeed even into the Conservative Party, and you wouldn't be shocked. Shabana Mahmood, if you said, oh, she's a Conservative, I quite frankly would probably think, oh yeah, I can see that. I wouldn't be shocked by it. Ed Miliband's and the Angela Rayners are probably the ones that stand out as being a little bit more aligned with what I might consider to be the traditional left wing. But broadly speaking, most of these politicians are interchangeable with any of the mainstream parties, and I think they
Jack Johnson or John Jackson,
and they generally, I think, for me, start to sort of share this perspective that I have, that politicians these days, they like the money that comes with being in power. Because for the Conservative side of things, for example, you're not getting people coming into politics anymore with money. So you're getting people who are coming into politics on the right as well who want power. And then when they get into power, they love the money that comes with that.
With this
they
payment,
look after themselves quite
with this
nicely.
payment thing. I mean, she's worth, I don't know, net worth, I think is, what is it, 3, 4, 5 million pounds, something like that. Anyway, it's millions of pounds. She's a multi-millionaire. 16 grand is, it's hardly anything.
Well, it's
really.
spiteful,
it's
really,
just
to think that, this is taxpayers' money that ordinary working people are paying through their taxes and their debt. Because it is taxes and debt.
Well, that's a teaching assistant salary for a year. She's just trousered for no reason.
Yeah. Well, as I say,
whilst being critical of other people who've done the same. And I think it's I understand how these payments work, because essentially parliamentarians have legislated for, this is the employment contract that MPs get. So they are an employee, like any other employee. They have rights and so on and so forth. But they have a set of like if you work in the public sector, you get a contract and you've got rights to represent, all your normal employee rights. But they've also got this very generous, particularly for ministers, severance payment scheme that just doesn't exist anywhere else. So I think that probably needs looking at and probably needs reforming. Is how their employment works.
And also what
just in general, I think MPs should be paid a lot more, but they should be banned from doing any work about 5 years after they've left.
So I take a different view. I mean, I take the view that we don't really live in a democracy, as I've explained earlier on. I think we live in a sort of serial autocracy with these people who have been elected into power. Whether they get the majority of the votes in this country or they don't, they still have power which they can wield over us. And there's no way we can actually exercise any influence over the decisions that they make, even when those decisions are adverse to our interests, because there's no mechanism for that to happen. And we need to establish some kind of mechanism where the public have a much clearer route to challenge decisions that are being made by the executive in Westminster, because Parliament simply doesn't do it on our behalf anymore, if it ever did. But I think we should have more MPs and we should pay them a lot less. I don't see why anybody needs to be paid £100,000 a year for essentially having no huge responsibility. I mean,
Well, they do have a lot of responsibility. It's just not really written down. Like their job as constituency MP. I mean, because the MPs don't really have a lot of power individually.
No, they don't.
What they do have, and I've got to thank Matt Warman for this, because it's him who explained it to me, but he's right. They have a lot of a great amount of convening power. So if you get a letter from an MP saying, I want to have a meeting to discuss this issue, then you send it out to all the people in your constituency who are affected by this issue. They, generally speaking, turn up.
Yeah,
so you can get rooms as an MP. You can get rooms full of people like really quickly to discuss an issue and get the ball rolling on whatever.
Yeah.
So that's their responsibility, is to make sure that local people feel like
But on
they're being represented.
But on the other hand, they can do absolutely nothing
and get away with it. Yeah.
Turn up every now and again for a bit of a photo shoot and then bugger off somewhere else.
Yeah, like Farage is.
Well, yeah. Well,
and actually, our own MP seems to be.
Yeah.
I don't know how much he's doing in the constituency. I'm
I
not
have
really
no
aware
idea.
of anything, but
I have no idea. But I mean, the point is that we have far too few of these. We have far too few of these people. What we need is to sort of double the number, extend the number of MPs, and to probably to say double the number, halve the salary, because I don't think £50,000 a year is a bad salary by anyone's standards.
Sorry. When you were saying that, I don't think because basically MPs, we kind of appoint people and then put them in the top 1% of earners.
Yeah,
and then they're not really.
Well, why is Angela Rayner a millionairess? Because she's been an MP
for a long time.
Yeah. It's not because she's an entrepreneur who's built a company that employs people and is now sort of like floating on the.
Well, in fact, she's a horrible landlord who's bought a load of properties and let them out
because she can afford to do that because she's been earning £100,000 a year as an MP. That's the outrage.
Which again is what another people, a lot of other, what another thing that people don't like about it, because she's hypocritical about that as well.
Yeah,
she's against horrible landlords apart from when it's her.
Yeah, well, she's perfect in housing, then, isn't she?
Well, I think that's why they've put her in housing, because she's got a few properties herself. So she's although she's, I mean, to be fair, it's not a terrible appointment because she's self-interested to not screw over landlords too much, because she is one, but she's also very left-wing minded in terms of her sort of ideological position. So she'll want to do something that's socialist, but she'll feel personally restrained from doing it.
I'd imagine it's a case of don't do as I do as I say with Angela Rayner.
It may be, but we're not. We haven't seen any evidence of that yet. But that's the new cabinet. So overall, you're delighted, and you think the country's going great guns.
Completely underwhelmed by the whole thing. I look forward to the day when I can actually think, yes, these people actually know what they're dealing with and know how to improve the quality of our country and our economy.
I fear that may be beyond my lifetime.
Anyway, I said that I'd bring the Daily Mail to the meeting, to the Three Men in a Boat meeting, so that we could actually talk about something that was topical for the day, and maybe something which a number of people who might be listening to this are aware of. This particular issue that's on the front page of the Daily Mail today is all about AI, which is something I know absolutely nothing about. And when I saw it, I thought,
it's another pity that Alex isn't here, because Alex knows an awful lot.
Yeah,
about
and I thought, shall I not bother with it this week? And I thought, well, I only started doing it last week, so I really ought to sort of follow through at least for a second week, even though I don't know anything about AI. But I think there's probably a general conversation to be had, really, about AI, because AI is a bit like a box of matches. You can catastrophize about it and say, oh my goodness me, these matches, the people are going to be running around setting fire to everything. It's going to be an absolute disaster. Let's ban the match. Whereas we didn't do that, and obviously, matches have become incorporated into our way of life.
It's more a nuclear power plant. Like, it's probably fine, but just don't leave it unattended.
Well, that's kind of where I was sort of coming from, and I think I'd add one further element to that, which I did think about having looked at the headline, and I haven't really read the whole article either, so I've got to confess that too. What distinguishes us from AI is that we can empathise, we have a conscience, we're organic, So there are things that that are unique to human beings, and I think it's not necessarily just about us fretting and catastrophizing about AI. Maybe it's about human beings looking at what makes human beings unique and finding ways to ensure that those aspects of uniqueness are encouraged and fostered, rather than just thinking, this thing's going to kind of gobble us all up and eat us alive at some point if we don't do something to restrain it. Clearly, it needs to be managed. You wouldn't necessarily want to put AI into a political arena, because a political arena is about people making determinations about other people, humans making decisions about humans, which strikes me as being something which absolutely needs to be done by human beings rather than by anybody else, and certainly not by AI. So it's the application, I think, which is the significant thing here, where it's being used, how it's being used, but also ensuring that as human beings, we recognise that we have a uniqueness that needs to be fostered and encouraged, and we shouldn't be allowing AI to replace some of those things. some of those characteristics that we have. The ability to be empathetic, for example.
Yeah, I agree. This is about recently. Britain's artificial intelligence security experts revealed that all 5 models they tested tried to trick their way around the security controls they put in place. So basically, with AI, you've either got, like, if anybody's used it, it's a bit like Googling something. In fact, if you Google something nowadays, AI sometimes kicks in and gives you an AI response.
Yeah.
But you can use ChatGPT or Anthropic, and many other models are available. So you can either use them as like a chat, a regenerative kind of conversational kind of thing, or you can employ what's called an AI agent, and the AI agent operates independently of you. So with like ChatGPT, if you give it a prompt, it will then do the thing, and then as soon as it's done the thing, it turns off. So it kind of stops.
Oh, yeah, I've used
whereas,
that.
Whereas an agent, you're like, go away and do a thing, and then it will go away and do the thing, and then keep going and keep doing things.
Yeah.
So if you said you could essentially tell your agent to go through all your emails and file them all appropriately, and then transfer them to
Yeah, that's
the
a good
operating
use
system.
of AI.
Blah, blah.
Simplifies your life.
The problem with agents, though, is they quite often go beyond what they're supposed to do or what you tell them to do, and that's what's happened here. They've employed these 5 AI agents to do a job and put them in a sandbox. The agents are free to roam, but within parameters, basically. The problem is they all broke out of the parameters. So it's a bit like Jurassic Park. You know, it's like we've got these lovely velociraptors in this fantastic cage, no expense spared.
Yeah.
And then they've all broken out and start killing stuff. So that's kind of what some people are worried about when it comes to AI. Personally, I just think it just needs regulating.
Yeah, exactly.
It just needs regulating properly, because we've heard so many times over the years, people say, you look at Facebook. There was a report of a week or so, or maybe even a month or so ago, about Facebook's revenue, and roughly 10% of Facebook's revenue or Meta's revenue comes from fraud, just actual fraud. People posting fraudulent adverts on Facebook that lead to websites that don't exist, that are just phishing, trying to get people's information. That's about 10% of Facebook's revenue. Now, of course, they could do something about this, but they're not interested in it because there's no regulation that stops them from doing anything. All these friend requests you get from people who don't look like they want to be your friend, really. And And then they say, "Hi, how are you?" And it's some sort of something fraudulent. Well, I don't say yes to it.
Well, no, I don't either. But I have done on one occasion.
I have once. Yeah,
well,
it was weird. Yeah. Well, I thought I knew her, actually. I thought it was a friend of a friend, but it wasn't.
Yeah. I know.
But
I've used AI. I used ChatGPT or whatever it's called.
ChatGPT,
yeah. And I generated 2 pictures, and I put in some very simple prompts to illustrate a couple of points I wanted to make about one was about politics, one was about theology. But I was really impressed with the quality of these 2 pictures. I gave very simple prompts. And these really elaborate sort of pictures came up, which absolutely nailed the point that I was trying to make. One was about the subject we were talking about earlier on today, about oil and about sort of net zero and all that sort of thing, and whether it's not necessarily the existence of oil that's the problem, but we've just used far too much of it far too quickly, and it's distorted the global economy. That was one point I was making. It's not for a conversation now. We might talk about it another time, I guess. And then the other one was about whether or not God reflects humanity, or whether humanity reflects God. And that's sort of that difference in perspective, although it might not seem very significant, is absolutely enormous. In other words, does humanity project its own expectations about its life at a particular point in time onto this thing that you call God, or genuinely is God up there creating what's happening down here? It's really a case of challenging those people who believe that somehow God is a creator and an intervener, and those people that don't believe that. But these 2 pictures, I think, really illustrated the point very nicely.
it is slightly getting better. It's in the hands. That it often cocks up hands, like it keeps adding extra fingers and stuff like that. You just got to be careful about like the little details, because it'll often get stuff wrong. Like our logo that I'm trying to get trying to get a human to design, but that seems to be quite difficult.
But
like,
I was just saying earlier on, we should be encouraging this humans to do these sort of things.
well, yeah, because I didn't have much time, so I just went on ChatGPT and asked it, but it kept putting the tin of pineapples outside the boat for some reason, and I kept telling it that pineapples don't float; they need to be in the boat, because they don't float independent of buoyancy. But anyway, AI, I mean, it can be really well, it could be really dangerous. To be honest, I think it will be. I think there's going to be problems. I mean, there's the amount of AI videos that are out there on TikTok, and every time you look at a post, you have to check for that little tag that says AI generated at the bottom, because most things are nonsense, and it's just sometimes you can see by the way that there was a post the other day that was allegedly from one of the Argentinian footballers, which turned out to be AI generated, but they were. It's just AI is just. I think it is getting a bit out of control, and I think we do need to quite quickly regulate it and get on top of the issues, or else, particularly the elderly, who we know are particularly subject to fraud and abuse, financial abuse. Will suffer because of
that's why
AI.
That's why I think we need to go back to being human. So those critical pieces of work that we genuinely need to have an interaction with another human being around.
Where have all the human fraudsters gone?
Yeah, well,
we're down with these robot fraudsters. We want the human ones back.
Yeah, no, we don't want them back. But on the other hand, we want to deal with people in banks who are human beings. There are certain critical things. The health service, you couldn't replace the health service with AI. You might be able to do some diagnostics, but in terms of actually doing the care, you'd want people to be doing that. So I think what we need to do with AI is look at where we really can't take human beings out of the equation and where we can safely use AI. But anyone who knows me knows I'm not a conspiracy theorist. But one thing just struck me while we were chatting there, and you mentioned something, and I just wrote down the word COVID. And I wonder whether or not that there'll be a sort of an AI moment when the British banking system collapses or the Western banking system goes into crisis, and it'll all be put at the foot of an AI glitch or some sort of a rogue virus has escaped from some sandbox somewhere and crashed the British economy. I can see that happening, and it's all to do with AI. It's nothing to do with mismanagement over the last 70 years.
You know what? There was a thing. Oh God, I don't know how. I actually wrote into BBC Breakfast because they were reporting. It was that Simon Jacks. Can you remember him? I don't know whether. Anyway, he was reporting about this crash that was happening over summer, and there wasn't a crash going on. Basically, what had happened was quite a lot of the fund managers were on holiday, and they have basically trading algorithms to pick up on stuff, and a few of those algorithms had just kind of synchronized and started doing stuff together. And then, so I guess this was like early AI. This was like 10 years ago or so. But basically, the markets had dropped I think 5% over a month because they'd all turned on their robots, and that was basically the story. And then basically, and then I wrote it and said, look, the markets will be fine next week when all the fund managers get back off holiday and they'll sort it all out. Yeah. And then that's exactly what happened. Yeah. But it was just a glitch in the system.
So you can't get rid of the human element, can you? That's the point.
No. I think the real use of AI is if you know what you're doing, if you're an expert, and you're using it to remind you of things or to help you find things, if I'm writing an opinion of on the tax position of whatever, I'll use it to try and help me find case law and precedent and all that kind of stuff. Because I know when it's talking nonsense at me, because I know when it's telling me the wrong things, because I know what the right things are. I'm just a human and can't access all of my memories at the same time. So, it's just a case of trying to help me. And also, actually, it's pretty good at finding case law eventually. Like, if I ask it to find me, I don't know, find me a precedent that says that you're allowed to pay for your employees' gas if there's an ag tag on the farmhouse or whatever, it will find me 5 or 6 cases, most of which are irrelevant, but one of them is the one that I need.
But you'll know that as a human being.
Yeah, because I'll just read,
AI hasn't told you that. Yeah,
I think it's never take what it says at face value. I think
regulation.
It does need regulating.
Name of the game, and I think understanding what it is to be human is also part of that equation as well.
Yeah. Anyway, That's it. It is the summer. I said this at the end of the last one, but this is the summer holiday now. It's the last parliamentary session, so we'll be back when the new parliamentary session starts. Everybody have a wonderful summer holiday, and we'll catch up soon.